everybody.
Hi there.
And welcome to
EVIL Asterisk Podcast
with Jeannie
and Louise.
We just watched Exit 8.
Incredible.
Wow. We saw it in the theater. It was really an immersive experience for us. Highly enjoyable. My kind of movie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a small film, but done so well.
It is an adaptation of a game by solo developer Kotake Create, who's actually one person. On social media, we shared an article about the movie that was coming out based on the game, and we were just super excited because we're fans of liminal spaces, and the film has it in spades. This is a film from Japan, and it's based on, as we said, a game called Exit 8. It's actually called The Exit 8, and the Japanese name of the film is 8-ban Deguchi, which could be the same as the game itself. Here's the description, the IMDb description. A man becomes increasingly desperate when he realizes he is trapped in a subway station, needing to complete a mission to get out. That sounds like a game, doesn't it?
It does.
It feels very game-like throughout the entire movie, and it's my kind of thing because not only does it focus on exploration, puzzle solving, trying to get out of a trapped location. You're actually trapped in the subway station and you're trying to get out. But it also involves meticulous observation. You need to observe things around you in your environment and figure out if there are any quote-unquote anomalies.
So one thing that I just realized is that it's called Exit 8 in particular, not Exit 7 or 9 or 10 or 11, because 8... actually, if you turn it horizontally, is the infinite symbol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, symbol for infinity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So genres, according to IMDb, body horror, folk horror, monster horror, psychological thriller, supernatural horror, action, adventure, and plain old horror. Now, I would take issue with a few of these. At least I didn't notice a specific body horror element except for some symbolism related to biotechnology, where animals were growing ears on their backs.
That's exactly what that is.
That's probably the body horror.
That's the only reason they're using that, because those are human body parts.
Which happens.
Attached to mice, which is that old experiment that was done in the early 2000s or late 90s or so. I don't remember when that was exactly.
Exactly. Directed by Genki Kawamura. Writers are Kotake Create, which is the solo developer that created the game, Kentaro Hirase, and Genki Kawamura. Very limited number of characters here. There's the Lost Man, Walking Man, and the Boy. And those are the three primary characters. There's also the partner of the Lost Man, who appears as a young woman in the subway. And then there's a high school girl that also appears. There's some interesting symbolism, and it also differs from the game. There's one in particular that I found very interesting, which is Escher's work, Mobius Strip 2, parentheses, Red Ants. And that, to me, symbolized people in industrialized society going about their business, but never being able to escape it. Like a lot of Escher's work, really symbolizes this entrapment, never really getting to an end point, repeating things. You're in a rut. You're going through the motions. You might think you're building something, but you're really just running in place. And that is part of what I think the film is, and the game, the original game, is talking about.
Yeah, and to further that point, Japanese society is famously known for being very much focused on work and loyalty to one's job. So they tend to work 12 to 14 hours a day sometimes. And after the work, there's some obligated, literally like drinking with work buddies. So a Japanese man that works a corporate job is basically just working and sleeping, working and sleeping, working and sleeping. And the character of the man that's constantly walking down the hall. In the game, there's no context other than the fact that he's walking down the hall, and eventually you find him stopped and looking at his phone. So that immediately translates to this kind of archetype or this society problem in Japan. Not to mention that suicides are a huge problem. Part of it because of that, but the other part is pressure for like teenagers to perform. It's interesting how the movie actually creates a character for the man who's walking down the hall, and we understand him a lot better than in the game itself. In the game, he's just an archetype. In the movie, he becomes a person, and there's a reason he's doing what he's doing. I think that's brilliant, because the game doesn't really give you much in terms of narrative. It's really kind of, you're stuck in a puzzle and you don't know why you're there. The game doesn't even have a title screen. It literally drops you in the subway corridor, and that's it.
The game is considered a walking simulator and a psychological horror game. So when you're playing the game itself, you are the lost man, which is the main character. Luis was referring to the walking man. And the walking man is someone that appears almost like an NPC or non-player character at the beginning of each floor related to this subway exit. You want to get to 8. You start out at 0. The types of characters you see primarily in the game would be walking man, the particular character that Luis was talking about, who has now a story, some sort of a backstory in the movie, didn't have that in the game. Then you find out a little bit about who this person was before he became simply walking man, who keeps appearing every time you go through what we now know is a loop. The film starts with the character known as Lost Man. We see a lot from his perspective. It's a lot of first person point of view. He's actually on a subway. He's not trapped yet, we think. He puts earbuds in his ears. He listens to Ravel's Bolero, which was very cool. The use of music, by the way, in this film was unbelievably cool. So while he's on the subway, super crowded subway, by the way, there's a mother holding a baby. Baby's making a lot of noise. And there's one character in that subway. It's right next to the mother. So he's just standing over her, shouting. He's really pissed off. He doesn't like the baby crying, and he's insulting the mother and just being incredibly rude. Our protagonist takes the earbuds out, hears the baby crying, looks over, and we see it from his point of view. You can see the baby, you can see the guy screaming at the poor mother, and then he turns back, looks out the window. He's standing right next to the door, so he can look and see what's going on outside the subway. And then he puts the earbuds back in, listens to the music again. Doesn't do anything, and then gets off the subway at some point. Then a call comes in from his partner, and they have an interesting conversation. It seems that the partner is at the hospital, is pregnant, and is trying to make a decision. She doesn't ever say exactly what that decision is. She said, which is it? Clearly, we can surmise that the decision is whether or not to keep the baby. She's either going to have a procedure at the hospital or not. And for some reason, it's all about asking Lost Man what his decision is.
He needs to decide himself if he's ready to be a father or not. And clearly, she doesn't want to be a single mother. So she's having to make a life-changing decision. And for her to make that decision, she needs to know that he's going to be there with her.
Good point. We also find out during this conversation, a lot of it is, again, first-person point of view. You're seeing his phone. You're seeing what's going on around him as he's walking. A lot of it is first-person. Does switch to third at various intervals. We find out that he has asthma. First, we don't know what's going on. It seems like he's choking while he's walking. He's having a hard time breathing. There's also some issues with reception. He's having a hard time hearing her. She cuts out at one point. She says, okay, well, I'm going to
stay at the hospital. She said.
No, we don't hear it all.
No, she said, no. She said, she was just telling him that she was still at the hospital. She's going to stay there.
But then it cuts out. She says something really important.
Then it cuts out.
I don't know what that was. She says, I think I'm going to... There's a reason it cuts out. He never answers her. She keeps saying, which is it? Which is it? He doesn't make a decision. He doesn't answer her. And he's like starting to cough and choke. It's probably a psychological reaction to the fact that she's asking him a very important question, life-changing question that he cannot answer right now. He's fumbling around for his inhaler at that point, and he's climbing stairs, trying to get out to the exit. He says, I'm coming over.
I think he said he was coming over. He was just trying to look for the exit. The setup early on when he's at the subway car, and there's a crying baby, young mother, kind of feeling attacked, and she's very uncomfortable and she's afraid. And our protagonist sees that, hears it. The moment he takes off his earbud and the noise cancelling stops working, it's actually really cool because in the theater mix, when he takes off his left earbud, we get sound only on the left side of the theater. And we hear the baby screaming and the guy screaming and everything. And he willfully chooses to put his earbud back on and the sound goes away again. And that's the setup. So basically he made a decision, quote unquote, there, that he does not want that in his life. So it's interesting when his girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend by the way, calls him, he's non-committal and he's having a really hard time making that decision because unconsciously he kind of made it already. He said, I don't want to have a baby in my life. I'm not going to help this young mother in the subway car.
Our protagonist is getting more and more uncomfortable as he continues to talk to his partner over the phone. Bad reception, the call's dropping. I think at one point it dropped completely and he wasn't able to hear the rest of what she was saying. And he's been kind of coughing and choking, and we realize he has asthma. So at one point he gets to this wonderfully liminal space. This is how the game starts, by the way. He gets to this hallway, which is all white tile. He looks up, he sees a sign that says exit 8. Go straight ahead. And that's the exit he's supposed to use to leave the subway. But then he looks at the wall and sees 0 instead of 8. And he also sees some other things. He sees lockers, he sees a blanket on the ground, doors on the right-hand side, posters on the left, an array of objects and environmental elements. Then he stops to read. When he realizes he's not going anywhere, he reads a sign and it says, if you see anomalies, turn back. If there are no anomalies, keep going. It's like, what's that? We learn as he learns, just like we're playing a game, that there are certain things that sometimes change as he's going through these identical, what look like floors, but now we realize it's a loop. We look at the posters, we look at the doors, we look at all the objects and the environmental elements, start to see what we call anomalies. Once we see an anomaly, sometimes they're really obvious anomalies, light changes, things start flickering, then we know to turn back. But when we turn back, we're seeing the same type of floor or same type of hallway. And then we see that the numbers are rising. So now we're at exit 1 instead of 0. Those could be seen as exits, they could be seen as floors, but in any case, your whole goal is to get to 8. Mm-hmm. And so you start at 0, and then if you see an anomaly, you have to turn back to get to 1. It's almost like you're running in place, but things are changing. What's very interesting, as Luis mentioned before, Walking Man shows up. So every single time you turn a particular corner, and whatever numbered loop or floor you're on, you will see Walking Man. Mm-hmm. And Walking Man comes around the corner, turns and starts walking toward you. You can't interact with him, but sometimes he does weird things. He'll turn around and smile at you. Then you know it's an anomaly and you got to turn back. The first part of the movie, the first chapter, after the what we would call the prologue, which happens on the subway itself, when Lost Man starts wandering this interesting loop, that's when part 1 of the film takes place.
Yeah.
There's a point at which it shifts and we have what we would call part 2, and it's about Walking Man's backstory. How did he get here? Why is he inhuman? Why is he just walking? Why do we keep seeing him over and over again? We know he's not a real person.
But is he?
Exactly. So we find out that there's a backstory.
And what I really love about the characters is that, like we mentioned before, the game itself only has him as an NPC that walks by you and eventually stops and looks down at his phone. And you see other characters in the game. You have a woman in the back. You have a human-like figure with the same texture as the walls.
Blending into the liminal space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the movie comes up with a storyline for a game that has no storyline. That's just brilliant. What it does, in my read, is that the Walking Man and the Lost Man are the same person. And basically, eventually, a kid shows up.
The boy.
And the kid is not the same person. The kid is the possible baby that his partner may or may not decide to keep. So you have a situation where now you have an intricate psychological framework around this liminal space horror film. And I think it works brilliantly because it's a moral dilemma told in a way where you're always kind of obsessing about the mechanics. Turn back. Jeannie and I kept screaming, us and the rest of the theater, by the way, turn back. No, anomaly, turn back. And it was so funny because the audience was incredibly engaged in this. Mesmerized. I'm not even sure how many of them played the game. We had them play the game at the time. We played later. But I'm not even sure who even knew this thing was based on the game. A Japanese game.
But it was interesting because we saw it on a Wednesday evening and the theater, I mean, it wasn't completely packed, but there were a lot of people in that theater. I was surprised.
Between a half and a third, I think. Filled.
Which is surprising for a Wednesday night these days.
Yeah. I was even surprised the thing was playing in our local theater because our AMC has a lot of movies that are, smaller sometimes. Mm-hmm. But But it's still an AMC.
They usually run for maybe a week if we're lucky, but I think this had already been out for at least a week. So I felt that there was a lot of excitement behind this movie coming out here because we knew it was doing well in Japan and we were super excited
Well,
about it coming over
it's
here.
crazier than that, actually.
Yeah.
It came out like a year ago in Japan, and it came out in Europe at the end of last year.
But in any case, there was a good amount of people in the theater. Everybody was engrossed. It was super exciting. Now, the second chapter of the film is called Walking Man.
We just understand that the walking man wasn't always robotic, that he was once a quote-unquote normal human being who also finds himself stuck in a subway. He's looking for the exit, he's heading toward exit 8. And what's fascinating is that he says that he's gonna see his son for the first time that day if he manages to get out of the subway. And that's literally the extent of his backstory, because he's walking, he's looking for the exit as a person, not as a robot or robotic looking person. Eventually he finds a young boy, and this young boy doesn't really talk. And the young boy is really good at spotting the anomalies, and he's kind of helping him navigate the exit, but at some point he ignores the boy. He doesn't listen to the boy, and the boy spots, for example, a door handle in the middle of the door instead of on the corner of the door where it's supposed to be. And
we didn't know that.
We didn't know that.
We only knew it when he did it with the Lost Man.
Exactly. The walking man eventually sees some stairs going upwards, going up to the surface. He just goes up that quote-unquote fake exit. And that's how the movie tells us that he becomes the walking man, a robotic version of a human being.
The walking man, to me, represents the people on the subway, like the guy on the subway that's screaming at the woman. He's walking around with a briefcase. He needs to get somewhere. He's either commuting to or from work. Unlike Lost Man, who's a younger guy who doesn't seem like he's going to and from a job. He might even not have a job. He might be a student. We're not really sure. We've got a guy, he's probably in his 40s or so, compared to our main character who looks like he's in his 20s. This walking man seems to be in a hurry to get somewhere. So when you see him when he's not a person, he's walking very stridently, carrying a briefcase. Sometimes he stops and looks at his phone. When we start getting the backstory, before he becomes a non-human, we do see, as Louise said, that he was similar to our protagonist, where he was simply trying to get out, trying to find an exit. The problem is, unlike our protagonist, he's one of those ants, those red ants in the Mobius strip, that's just working, sleeping, working, sleeping. I need to get here, I need to get there, I need to get here, I need to get there. However, as Louise said, he mentions a son. He said, I'm going to see my son for the first time. What does that mean? He somehow represents the main character. He does meet up with this boy, and they work together to try to find a way out. But, as Louise said, he doesn't pay attention to the boy. The boy is mute, at least at this point in the film. The boy points to a door. We don't know why he's pointing. The man says, no, come on. We're going to keep going this way. Well, as the man does see what looks like exit 8, which is not a real exit because there was an anomaly, he tries to get the boy to go with him, actually. He reaches his hand and goes, come on, come on, come on. He tries to get the boy to go to the exit with him. The kid already knows that it is not the right exit. He had already found that anomaly. He will not go with him. He knows that it's a trap. As the man is going through the false exit, he screams, I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty. Now, I'm not really sure why he's saying that. The only thing we know about this guy is that he said that, and he talked about seeing his son for the first time. Is he going to court to see his son? Is there something about a lawsuit? Why is he saying, I'm not guilty? Or is there some overarching psychological, existential statement that he was making? And then at that point, when we see Walking Man, for the first time, the little boy sees him going along the hall, knows he's not a real person.
So in my opinion, the only real person is the Lost Man. The Walking Man is a version of the Lost Man that told the woman he was not ready to be a father, and therefore never saw his kid grow up, and probably had to be called to court to pay alimony or to pay for the cost of raising that kid. He was being dragged into court, and he was going to see his kid for the first time.
So do you think that the Lost Man's partner then made the decision to keep the baby, didn't care what his decision was, even though she asked? She said, which is it? Which is it? You're thinking that she didn't really
Yeah,
ultimately
that's
take that into consideration,
yeah.
went ahead and had the baby, and then years later somehow is trying to get way later. Looks like he's 20 years older than the other guy. You're saying 20 years from then, when a baby is 20 years old.
The woman never told him about the kid, and the kid probably decided to find who his father was. That's a version, like you said, main character 20 years later, workaholic, only cares about work, only cares about himself, selfish, okay, neurotic. To the point where, by the way, that guy gets distracted when he's walking the loop and sees the young girl and doesn't realize she's an anomaly. He literally stops and starts talking to her because that's the kind of guy he is.
That's the what we would call the high school student. That's the name of the character. It's high school student. Some people say high school girl.
The movie suggests that anyone who is a quote-unquote real person starts that way, and then eventually they go crazy, they get stuck, and they turn robotic, they become an NPC. And eventually they turn robotic if they get lost. My premise for this really is that no one's real other than the lost man. My theory is that the movie is using this dilemma as a way to flesh out those other characters, to give meaning to those characters.
Okay.
We're supposed to see them. We're supposed to see the lost man and the walking man as the same person. We're supposed to see the kid, the young boy, as his future son. And of course, we see his partner, which shows up as a real person on the phone and then shows up as an anomaly eventually. The movie is
What
basically...
about the high school girl?
She represents, I think, that older man who grew up alone or who grew up only having flings or never having any kind of real commitment, being distracted by something that turns out to be an anomaly. And he never committed. He never saw his kid. He was going to meet his kid for the first time when his kid was already in their 20s. And that's why he says, I'm not guilty, I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty of what? I'm not guilty of abandoning my son.
I like to think of it that way, as having these representations of different people that are really just aspects of one character.
The boy saw the mother as an anomaly, said, Mama, Mama, Mama. He recognizes his mother. That's another hint the boy is not real. He tries to run toward the anomaly. He recognized her.
He is a representation of Lost Man's future child. When this character shows up, who is called Young Woman, that character is actually the partner of Lost Man. And that's the same actress. He recognizes that character as his mother. So even though we see the boy on the Walking Man's timeline, without Lost Man being present in part 2, it's really the Walking Man's backstory. By the way, part 3 is the boy. What Luis is saying is that the Lost Man, who is remaining nameless, is a real person. We're looking at life through his eyes. We're looking at when he was on the subway. Then we also saw his whole journey trying to get out and being stuck. But then we do flip to what would be considered the Walking Man's timeline when the Lost Man is not present, at least in chapter 2. We see the Walking Man. We see a very minor backstory for the Walking Man. And we see him teaming up, so to speak, with the boy. And then ultimately, even though he's trying to get the boy to come with him, which I think is really interesting, he's trying to get the boy to come with him to the exit, which is, as we know, is a false exit. But he's saying, I'm not guilty, but he's still trying to grab the boy. He's not talking about that boy as being his son. He's saying, I'm going to see my son for the first time. Yet he's reaching out to the boy.
Yeah, because he's never met his son. Therefore, he wouldn't recognize the boy. The lost man doesn't recognize the boy either.
Right. It's a really cool theory.
Yeah.
I wonder if a lot of other people have the same theory.
I think so. It's not hard to get to this theory.
No, it isn't. And it's a clean way of looking at the film.
This man, he's trying to be helpful to the boy, but he's not really that much of a caring person. He's very selfish.
He's one of those red ants.
Yeah, he's self-involved. The loop itself is a Mobius strip. That's why the movie has Escher and the game doesn't.
Yeah.
You know,
I thought that was interesting.
They're trying to make it more obvious for us.
More narrative, because that's what movies do. And that's a good game adaptation. The fact that there are backstories in here, the fact that we've added the Mobius strip, the Escher piece, on the wall, it's replacing a different poster that's being used in the game, was wise because that gives you more of a narrative, and that's the goal of a film adaptation. There's the third chapter, which is called The Boy. Most of this chapter, it's the boy and actually the lost man. They are together during most of this chapter. We do find out that the boy is hiding from his mother because he ran away on purpose and hoped that she would come looking for him. We think that this is in the subway itself, that he was there with his mom and that he specifically hid so that she would come looking for him. And then he made a mistake because he realizes he shouldn't have done that. When he does find the mom, like you said, he goes, "Mommy, Mommy." He misses her.
That is the storyline or the timeline where he grows up with no father. She's a single mother. She has a really hard time raising him by herself. That is the future of the walking man. He chose not to be a father. But then she had to decide, do I end this pregnancy or do I go with it alone? And she did. And that's why she had an unhappy time as a young mother, as a single mother. That's basically, from my perspective, which could be wrong, of course, what happened. The reason eventually the future, quote unquote, changes is because later on in the film, when there's the sound of a tsunami alert, the sirens, the emergency sirens are going, that's an anomaly. The lost man freezes in place until he sees the water coming, and then he starts running with the boy, but the boy falls behind. So now he has a moral choice. Do I risk drowning and saving him, or do I save myself? So instead of being like the walking man who only thinks of himself, the lost man, our protagonist, goes and grabs the boy, and they get taken by the waters, but he's able to carry the boy upwards.
I love that.
And put it on top of the sign, of the exit 8 sign, and the boy doesn't drown, the boy is saved. Then we have a flash forward of a possible future where there are a happy family. He had decided to have the kid was born, they're having a great time,
at the beach.
A fun time at the beach, and that changes the perspective. That's why from that moment on, the boy most likely will be born and most likely will grow up with a father.
The boy is not running away from the mother because she's mean. He's trying to get her attention and wanting her to find him. And it's similar in a way to his relationship with the walking man, where he wants the attention. He wants the walking man to pay attention to him for good reason. He would save the walking man's life if the walking man were to pay attention to him. He points to a door and the walking man says, no, 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 no. He's not really paying attention. And that's an issue. So I think the boy is trying to get the attention of both parental figures, including the mother. But he breaks down at one point because he does see what he thinks is his mother, which is an anomaly, and the lost man saves him. The lost man doesn't let him go toward that anomaly, which he also recognizes as his partner. He knows there's no way she'd be in the subway. So I thought that was really interesting too, because the boy was trying to save the walking man's life. Walking man did not allow that to happen and tried to take the boy with him, which would have caused both of them to end up being stuck forever. The lost man does save the boy's life, and as Luis said, raises him up over the sign as this tsunami-like wave comes through. And Luis mentioned the whole beach scene where you can see a different future, this wonderful future with him and his son and, of course, his partner. The little boy had already given the main character, the lost man, a shell. He said, "Here, take it for good luck." He had given it to him in the subway floor, the trap that they're in. So in that beach scene, we see the shell again.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, like Jeannie said, the shell is first given to the lost man as they trudge along to exit 8. But the origin of the seashell is given to us in this flash forward. The whole seashell thing, again, not real. Doesn't happen in reality. Or maybe it'll never happen, depending on what choice is made, right? But the movie suggests that because he saved the boy, that it will happen. And that is not a literal choice that we see in the movie with him saving the kid from drowning. Is really an internal choice that he makes about having the kid. The moment he decides to have the kid, that's when something changes. It's an internal change.
I think it's interesting that there is a flash forward and we do see the boy representing his future son. The movie does really tell us that. I think your theory makes a lot of sense. The walking man is the outcome if he doesn't end up taking responsibility. He might change his mind and go, wait, I want to see my kid. But he almost brought that kid to his doom. So he was the irresponsible, quote unquote, parent, focusing on himself. I like the idea of the Trinity. The lost man, who's the 20-something, who's in the process of making a really tough decision about his life. The walking man, who's the older man, and that is the consequence of what happens if he makes one decision, which is basically I'm not going to bother helping or being involved in my child's life and not bother helping my partner. I'm going to just go off and do stuff on my own. And then the third element, which is the son, his own son, the future of having that son and having that relationship. That relationship ends up saving both of them.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the key.
Exactly.
Because they ultimately end up getting out of the exit. One thing I thought was interesting is that at the end of the movie, when all the anomalies are discovered, we're going in the right direction, he ends up exiting. There's the phone call again, and she's asking, which is it? Which is it? He goes, I'm coming to see you. He still doesn't answer, but he says, I'm coming to see you. The boy disappears because, again, as you said, there is no boy. The boy was more of an apparition or a symbol of the future child. Even though in the loop, which is part 2 of the movie, we focus on the walking man and his relationship with the boy. That could just be symbolism, because we don't see the lost man in that portion.
You could think early on, and we did, that the boy was an anomaly.
Yeah.
And the movie proves to us it's not an anomaly. His partner's spectral appearance was an anomaly. So from knowing that the boy was not an anomaly, what does that say? That says he was a real, quote-unquote, internal character for the protagonist. And because the protagonist is the same person as the walking man, they both saw the boy. He was internal personage.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
To both of them.
Right.
The high school girl was an internal personage for the older man.
What's interesting is that particular character. She was the equivalent to the walking man as the walking man was to the lost man. Let's put it that way. When the walking man, before he becomes the walking man, we see the backstory, we see him acting like a normal human being. He sees the high school girl come around the corner and walk, just like he ends up coming around the corner and walking for the lost man. Going back to the high school girl, we keep seeing her just sort of walking along. And then at one point, she stops. Just like the walking man stops and does this weird smile. She turns around and she just says, is this purgatory? Are we all dead? It was a different sort of commentary from an apparition or entity.
Well, that's kind of cool because she says, is this purgatory? And you could say that the life that the walking man chose for himself, endless hours at work, no family life, no legacy, no commitment to anything but work and himself, is a type of purgatory.
Absolutely. And so if we go back and see how Walking Man is reflected on Lost Man, we get this. The Lost Man was on the subway train. There were a bunch of businessmen and women on that train, all dressed in drab, black, and white clothing, maybe some grays. And then we see the mother with her baby, and the baby's crying and causing quote-unquote chaos on the subway train. And then the guy is, some people call him a male Karen, the businessman that's yelling at the baby. So we have that set up. They all look the same, but he looks different. The lost man is 20-something, dressed in casual clothing. He's like a kid. He almost looks like a teenager. And he looks like maybe he doesn't even have a job, as we talked about before. He's on that subway train, and he already sees a glimpse of what his possible future could be if he ends up becoming one of those businessmen. He then goes into the area with those halls, endless paths, and he sees that walking man come by every single time. What's interesting about the walking man, though, is he has no jacket on. Everybody else has these coats or dressed with a tie and all this stuff. He just has a white shirt on and dark pants. He's got a briefcase and a ponytail. It's a different look than the people on the subway. It's almost like he wasn't fully embracing that businessman's life, but that is a hell for him. That is showing his hell. Whereas the walking man sees the high school girl and she comments on the hell.
Well, this movie is all about mirrors. The young mother in the subway car early on is basically a future version of the main character's partner, if she has the kid by herself and she's settled with being a single mother. Just like the man screaming at her, the businessman, is a mirror image of the walking man. The Mobius strip is a 4-dimensional construct. It stretches beyond 3 dimensions. It's literally the same thing as the loop in the movie because they are walking horizontally. They never go up or downstairs other than the fake exit that the walking man takes. And still, like Jeannie pointed earlier, the number changes. It says the next exit is coming next. Now it's 2, now it's 3, now it's 4. And in the game, if you don't stumble on any anomalies and you keep walking, you naturally start hitting different exits until hopefully you get to exit 8. The fact that that number is changing, but there's only a single loop that seems to be about the same distance, suggests that that is a 4-dimensional path. And why is it 4-dimensional? Because it's all happening in the protagonist's head. So it's a way to take the game construct, a liminal space play, on being lost, on trying to solve some sort of a puzzle to escape this maze, it makes that into a psychological maze.
It is a psychological maze. Yeah, it definitely is. But there is a sci-fi element. If indeed we're looking at a four-dimensional space, if we just think for a moment it isn't going on in his head, if you think of real sci-fi, if you're caught in something, maybe it is because of a psychological reason, but maybe there's a real reason. Maybe you're actually part of a sci-fi trope, which is a whole other thing. In the game itself, you think of it as sci-fi.
There's a movie that addressed that. Everybody Loves Cube. Hypercube addressed that.
I didn't like that as much, though.
I know, but it's the same
I know.
idea.
It was harder to do, and that's why, because it's a more complex idea. But I think Exit 8 addresses that in a much better way, because you do wonder, well, is this psychological or not? And you're not getting into a lot of hard science, but you do understand the concept of having to turn back, but you're still moving forward in some way. You could see it as a spiral, and that's why I said it could be seen in terms of floors. I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, my mom would drive me to her doctor. I would be her doctor with her. It was in La Jolla, and we'd be driving to park. She'd keep going to try to find a parking space, and we'd keep going around and around and around. And I would see the same items, the same objects over and over and over again, because the way that garage was, it wasn't identifying floors. So it didn't have a sign, you're on the second floor, third floor, fourth floor. You would just keep going around and around. And I got so confused when I was a kid. I was thinking that we were in some other dimension, because we would keep spinning around and around and around. I'm like, are we just going in one place? No, I'm starting to see that the cars are different. I'm starting to notice some other things that are different. And it really freaked me out. I didn't understand how that was working. I literally didn't get it. I think I was like 3 years old or something. And it was so confusing. And then, of course, you realize later, yeah, everything's just going a little bit higher, a little bit higher. You're going to different floors, but you don't really detect it when you're super young. It just feels like you're going around in a circle, not a spiral. One of the reasons why I had said floors originally, it's almost like they're going up and up in a spiral. But of course, this is maybe dimensionality more than anything else. The fact that they can go backwards is where it becomes really intriguing.
If you get a spiral and you flatten it, now it's just a loop.
Exactly. And that's what this is. It's a spiral that's being flattened, but it's also this idea of the Mobius strip. The Escher piece, you see that it is a form of a spiral. You flatten that and it becomes a loop.
A loop is a two-dimensional object. It has length and it has width. And once you add depth,
then you have the spiral.
So a spiral is a three-dimensional object.
Right.
So what the movie is really saying is that the loop that we're seeing is more than what is being portrayed in the movie in three-dimensional space. Whatever's happening there is happening in 4 dimensions.
Fourth dimension is usually time. So are we looking at time as part of the loop? The intriguing part is we're not going in one direction and just going up a spiral. We're actually turning around and still moving quote unquote forward. If we think of 8 as being higher up on the spiral than 0, we do see that we're moving up. But then if we turn around, that's the part that's tricky and really cool. If we find out that there are anomalies on that particular floor, we have to immediately backtrack. We think we're backtracking, but we're actually going up again, even though we literally turned around. That's the beauty of this, I think. Mm-hmm. Now, at the very end, the little boy disappears because, as Louise said, he might not be real. It might be a flash forward or a symbol more than anything else. And the lost man does finally get to an exit. But guess what? He gets back on the subway. He's not going out onto the street. He goes back on the subway. You see all these people dressed in their business suits again. He goes back on the subway again. All of a sudden, we're at the beginning of the movie again. He's listening to Bolero. He's got his earbuds in his ears. At one point, he takes them out. He looks, he turns, first person POV again. And you see the baby crying. You see the same businessman yelling at the baby and the mother. The very last portion of the movie, he does stick his earbuds back in his ear. You see him from the outside of the subway car. You can see him looking out, and then you see him start to turn toward the baby. So the assumption is he's going to protect the woman. He's going to protect the baby. He's going to not let this businessman scream at the baby and the woman. No one else is helping, by the way. So he's going to be the quote-unquote hero. He's also making a decision. He wasn't making any decision when he first got lost. Then he started to have to make decisions. That's another thing. He was being tested. Now he's going to make a decision to help a mother in need. And that's going to maybe lead to him making an important decision to become a responsible father to his own unborn son.
Yeah, that will lead to him deciding to become a father.
And that's what we see. It's a split second at the end. Another thing is that at one point there's an anomaly where a door is open on one of the loops or floors. We see a door opening, and of course that's an anomaly. The door shouldn't be open. And then he sort of pokes his head there to see what's going on, and he sees himself on the subway again, as we see him at the end looking out.
He's with the kid at this point, and they see the door open, and the kid knows better to go in, but the guy insists on opening the door slightly and looking inside. And like Jeannie just described, he saw himself inside the subway car, staring outside the window, clearly in the midst of having to make a decision. So he wisely backs out and closes the door, and they don't lose that loop because of it. If he kept walking forward, he would have lost that loop. He would be back to zero again. They retreat after that, and they don't lose that loop. But yeah, the movie suggests at the end that he's gonna eventually decide to keep the kid. And we know he does decide to keep the kid because he saved the kid from drowning earlier. That's really when the decision was made. And
Big
that's
decision.
why we got the nice flash forward with the beach. Another thing that's really important is the following. This is not overt, but it's there. He starts in a subway car. His partner calls him. She says, "I'm pregnant. I know we're not together anymore." She's actually his ex-girlfriend. "But I just found out I'm pregnant." Which is it? And then what is this guy doing, talking to her on the phone? He's heading toward the exit. The moment he hears that, he's leaning toward, not ready to be a father. And that's when he gets stuck in the loop, when he finds his way out of the loop.
He goes back to the subway car.
Exactly. Everyone else in the station is heading toward the exit. Because before, his decision was to head toward the exit.
Right. So why is he back in the subway car? Because he has to change history, in a way. He has to make a different decision in the subway
Because
car.
now, when everyone else is still heading toward the exit, that's clearly marked, and he's walking away from the exit back in the subway car, is that's the only way to get to the hospital where she is.
Right. He said, "I'm coming." But he also said that
He was lying. And that's how the whole loop happens.
That's how the whole thing happens.
That's why at that
He
moment,
glitched
there's a
out.
schism in his mind, and he gets stuck in this existential loop.
He glitched out.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
moment that happens,
that's
there's a
interesting.
cleaving
Right.
from him, from reality. So now, whatever we see once he gets on the loop is inside his head. Nothing is real. But the moment he makes a decision to keep the kid, he had to make a decision either way.
He is heading to the hospital.
Yes.
But inside the subway car, turns to help the other woman. That's the decision.
That's the
in a
real
way.
life decision.
So I just wanted to say a little bit about the gameplay, the movie, and the game. We've got gameplay going here. This is like watching someone playing a game, but there's more to it. There's a lot more narrative going on than in the game itself. However, I wanted to make a statement about the game. When we were playing it, you have to be so meticulous, you have to be so careful that you don't miss an anomaly. So when you're walking down the hall in this floor, liminal space, you are looking at posters on the left, and you've got, 6 different posters, I think?
6 or 7.
Yeah, and you are having to memorize certain elements of each of those posters. And then you turn to the right and you see doors and you see vents and then what they're calling a fire hydrant. So you're seeing all this stuff, and you have to be super meticulous when you're playing the game. It reminded me of one of my favorite games, Papers, Please, because Papers, Please is all about being meticulous, making sure everything matches up, or there are no anomalies, which is a similar concept, although there's another narrative behind it that is much more concerning than making sure that everything is in order. All the papers are in order, because even if the papers are not in order, you could save someone's life. But then you've got Exit 8, where it's a similar concept of having to verify that these items are correct. You only have the previous correct floor or correct loop to go on, and you can't compare because you've seen it and now you're not in that space anymore. So because it's a walking simulator, you're no longer in the space in which you can do any comparison. So you have to just remember. And if something bugs out at you, like example, Bug Eyes, which was attached to, you didn't notice it,
Yeah,
but one
Jeannie
of the
caught that one.
posters had the normal character, his eyes were like, woo, bugging out of his head. And I said, no, we gotta go. And there's a lot of horror horror elements to that because you got, oh my gosh, we got to go around, we got to go back, or something's going to get us. That's how you feel. You feel like something's after you, and you feel like you have to get out of that environment in order to be safe. And then the horror of finding out that you made the wrong decision to turn back and then you're back at 0. That's a scary feeling. But also going up to the next quote unquote level so you can get to 8, it's very tense. There's a lot of tension associated with the mechanics in this game. There are a few obvious horror elements in the game itself. There's blood that appears sometimes on the walls, changes in the environment that are pretty scary and sudden. And then there's also this creature that blends itself into the tile, and it looks really creepy, poking itself out of the tile. Strange golem creature. All of a sudden, the poster has these weird large eyes. Those are sudden changes in the environment that can be very disconcerting, makes you feel a little bit of dread. And then sometimes they're startling and they are scary. There are some scary elements, and then you have to turn back and you have to go quickly, and you're like, no, turn around, turn around. That brings a lot of excitement to playing the game. And then when you're watching the movie, you have similar feelings. It's like, no, you're telling the character, turn back, turn back, turn back. We had talked about the one body horror element related to the experiments on rats, where you're growing ears and noses and stuff like that. That appears, of course, because he had already been looking at that in his phone. So that comes up in apparitions within the liminal spaces. But there are other elements where you turn around and the walking man is standing right there smiling at you. You weren't expecting it. It creeps you out. It's startling. For me, that's a psychological horror element that scares me to death usually because it's just sudden. One of my favorite things about horror movies is to be startled. The apparition of the partner representing the mother of the boy, it was ghost-like, and I think there was blood used at one point. And,
from the vent, I think.
Yeah,
right?
from the vent.
The music in the movie was really incredible, and it was very different.
Ravel's Bolero, the use of classical music, on point. In fact, at the very end, all the credits were going with a beat, which I thought was wonderful.
They were doing the credits, like Jeannie said, they hit the beat, but then they revealed themselves little by little, like a puzzle being made obvious. Great. So they were timed. That piece plays in the movie opening, and it plays at the end, so it bookends the film. I want to talk about the technical aspects. This thing is masterfully directed. It's a minimalist style with a lot of Steadicam, some really cool pans, following people walking and then showing them take different corners, and no moment without the geographical continuity of the loop itself. It's just perfect. It matches the game to like 98% or something. Only the posters had different design.
And the game, of course, is all first-person POV. What I thought was neat about the film is that first-person POV was used a lot, but there was a lot of shift between first and third, which is important in a film. You can't go full-on first-person POV in a film. Very few films ever made tried that with mixed success.
One influence on this that I'm pulling out of a hat, because I think that's the case, is PT, the playable teaser that Hideo Kojima made with Guillermo del Toro for PS4. PT very famously was supposed to be possibly a new Silent Hill game, and that got canceled. And eventually it got pulled.
Oh, you're talking about the one we played? And we luckily were able to play?
That you go on a loop
around
the house
it.
And things change.
Oh, yeah, that was so much fun.
It's terrifying, right?
But wait, what was Silent Hills then?
That was a rumor. That was what the game was supposed to be called.
When we played it, we thought it was going to be Silent Hills, but it was PT, playable teaser.
Yeah.
I'm sad that got pulled. I wanted to play it again.
It got pulled, and what's even sadder is that we have it on our PlayStation account, but we can't download it anymore. And that's because at some point I deleted it. And consoles with the demo exist, and they go for a lot of money because you can't get it anymore unless I guess you pirated it. I don't know at the time. Got rid of it. I know. So I think, from the top of my head, that's one of the influences. So this movie has perfect direction, great acting.
There's not a lot of dialogue, I should also mention. We love films that are not in English, so we're fine, and we always watch captions anyway, but some of you who are listening or watching might be averse to that, but you shouldn't be with this, because there is hardly any dialogue whatsoever. You're going to have a lot of visuals. You're not going to get lost in dialogue at all.
It was that simple to watch this in the theater.
Absolutely.
The captions are gigantic, and there are not a lot of them. I had no trouble following. Sometimes you watch stuff on streaming with captions, and suddenly it's impossible impossible to catch them. I've seen some that are really long.
Yeah, we'll have to pause and go, wait, what was that?
That is not the case here. It's easy to watch. Jeannie and I have been watching a lot more movies in the theater lately.
AMC A-list.
I know, right? We agreed that a movie like this needs to be experienced with an audience, in a big screen, with loud sound.
If possible.
Yeah, I don't think it would have had the same impact on us if we watched it at home.
Yeah, films like this, and Undertone is another good example, you really need to have that immersive experience. Even Iron Lung, being in the theater, you felt like you were in an Iron Lung. We talked about that when we did our podcast for that movie. I really do feel that enclosed spaces, liminal spaces, films that are focusing on that, it's much better to be able to see that in the theater if you can. If you can't, that's fine, but try to eliminate distractions.
Yeah, that's super important. Watching a movie at home, even if you have a big television, even if your TV is 65 inches or even 85 inches, even if you have a good sound system, unless you have a 25 grand home theater, most likely you will not be able to match even like a basic laser projection at a movie theater, even without Atmos.
But do what you can, like I said, to eliminate distractions and really focus and have an immersive experience. Turn the lights off.
Yeah.
Try to replicate the theater experience.
And I would say that if someone watches this at home and all they have is a sound bar or just the TV speakers, it could cut the enjoyment out of this thing by 50%. Because sound is a huge element.
Huge.
And the way they do the stereo separation when he puts his earbuds in and out to mirror noise canceling tech, it was just perfect.
And that reminded me of Undertone.
Yeah, because Undertone is another one that will not work at home. Because Undertone is very low budget, it's very limited, it's all in one environment. And
sound is so important.
you know, the house that Undertone takes place, it's tiny.
Right.
If you watch it at home. But in a movie theater, suddenly the house is your whole world.
Exactly.
So the sense of scale that you get, even from a small screen, we saw this in a small screen. It was like a 75-person screening room or something. And even then,
Very
on
effective.
basic surround sound, not Atmos, we didn't sit in Dolby Vision.
No.
Something simple, just AMC laser. It was still mind-blowing. And the whole audience was like mesmerized. And we're all screaming together and talking about, go back, turn back.
Laughing.
Anomaly.
I was getting really nervous. Luis was like, shh. Because I was like,
Jeannie was...
putting my...
Because she was so nervous.
But other people were having the same reaction, freaking out during the entire experience.
So I would say I give Exit 8 2 anomalies up.
2 hearty thumbs up. I love this film. I have nothing negative to say about it. Absolutely nothing.
I think it's a better film than Iron Lung. I do. And it's one of the best game adaptations of all time. That is not faint praise.
I wholeheartedly agree. Amazing film. Must be seen. So go see it.
Go see it if you can. But if by the time you hear this, it's out of theaters, like Jeannie suggested, turn your lights down, watch in the biggest screen you have access to, raise the volume, and focus on it.
Yeah, no distractions.
You don't even have to play the game beforehand. It's actually more fun to play the game afterwards. I think.
Yeah, we do that a lot. We did the same thing with Iron Lung. So I think we're ready to call it a day. We're wrapping it up. We're closing the loop. We have located the exit. Time to depart. I guess it's time to bid you adieu. Bye.
For now.